Hello and welcome to the African Tech Roundup, episode 96 for the week ending Monday, February 20th. Now, this is where we round up the week's most important tech, digital, and innovation news from across the African continent. My name is Andile Masugu, and I'm so glad you could join me. This week, though, we bring you something a little different on the show. Now, you know how often we ask you, our listeners, to contribute insights and commentary on the stories that we cover each week? Well, many of you do just that, and we absolutely love it. We're really grateful for all your tweets, Facebook and Instagram posts, your emails, and even the audio clips that some of you guys send through that make the show that much richer and certainly help to balance the perspectives I share on the show. And so I'm often asked by listeners on the show and in the course of my daily grind, what informs my opinionated take on the biggest tech and innovation stories we cover each week. And I often tell people that firstly, I generally have an opinion about pretty much everything. And I'm usually more than happy to share that opinion and also just to have it challenged and tested by other really smart people that I get to meet. The other thing, though, is that you need to realize that I have, I'd say, 5 to 10 times more conversations per week than the average person anywhere in the world. So it's often those conversations that help me uncover insights that are rarely exposed by blogs or tweets and think pieces that you typically find online, with regards to Africa's tech and innovation scene. And it's not just conversations with high-flying C-suite types, but often it's conversations with startup founders, career tech heads, VCs, business angels, as well as everyday Africans who are leveraging tech to make a better life for themselves. And so this week, we thought it might be a plan to dedicate an entire show to let you in on some of the offline conversations that I have with listeners of the show. So stick around because we'll listen in on a chat that Chris Campbell, who's the co-founder of the African Business Angels Network, he taped a conversation while on the road with the Nigerian angel investor and all-round advocate for Africa's early-stage tech business ecosystem, Tomi Davies. And then I'll also share a part of a conversation I had with a Ugandan blogger, tech activist, and entrepreneur named Nicholas Kyanda, who is easily one of our favorite Ugandan listeners. And while that's all coming up, we need to do this first. This episode of the African Tech Roundup is brought to you by a partner initiative that we're super excited about. It's the Afrobytes conference that's happening in Paris this June, and it's being convened by Afrobytes founders Amin Yusuf and Hawea Mohammed, two incredible Africans who will be hosting this event at Station F, the world's largest startup campus right in Paris. Now, Afrobytes is easily Europe's premier African tech conference, and this year, for the first time, it'll be taking place during the Future Ensemble Festival in Paris. Now, make a plan to join a bunch of people who truly believe that the next big digital and human adventure will take place in Africa. It's a chance for you to learn about the latest innovation trends impacting the African ecosystem. Think startups, tech talent, investors, executives, all with a passion for growth and innovation and keen to initiate dialogue and build roadmaps for action. For more info on the conference and how you can book early bird tickets and to take in the event's incredible speaker list, which includes Almaz Nagesh, Eric Mugendi, Chidi Okpala, Cloud Grunetsky, Samir Abdelkri, Tayo Akinyemi, Tebe Ikalafeng, Toro Orero, Aaron Fu, and of course yours truly, just to name some, head over to afrobytes.com right now. And we can't wait to see y'all in Paris. And now, as promised, I'm about to play some clips that will let you into the minds of some individuals who are actively involved in Africa's tech ecosystem, both on the continent and abroad. It should give you a sense of some of the conversations I have day to day with some of the brightest people at the coalface of innovation on the African continent. Now, first up is some audio from A-Band's Chris Campbell, who caught up with Candace Johnson at the World Business Angels Investment Forum that just wrapped in Turkey recently. Now, Candace is the co-chair of the Global Business Angels Network, and Chris got her to react to Africa's presence at the event. Then, of course, Chris also spoke to the illustrious Nigerian thinker and angel investor Tommy Davies and got him to share his thoughts on how the world is waking up to the notion of Africa being a serious tech investment destination. Take a listen.
This is Chris Campbell, co-founder of the African Business Angel Network and the South African Business Angel Network. And I'm here at the World Business Angels Investment Forum in Istanbul, Turkey. And with me I have Candace Johnson, President of the European Trade Association for Business Angels and a co-chair of the Global Business Angel Network. Candace, it's fantastic to be here with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, and it's been so great to have the president of ABAN, to have the CEO of VC for Africa, to have all of these African Business Angel Network board members here at the World Business Angel Investment Forum. It has been an exciting 2 days. We have had business angels from around the world. We have had corporations from around the world. And there's also been a focus on fintech, which is very interesting because in Africa, fintech is really taking off. And what was also so exciting here was, seeing Africa angel investors and entrepreneurs really take the world stage and light up and enthuse all of the investors coming from around the world as to the opportunities that are today present in Africa. It's been a great 2 days, and we look forward to coming, all of us, to South Africa very soon for the Global Entrepreneurship Congress and the Global Business Angel Network.
Thank you so much, Candace. Standing here with Tommy Davies, the president of the African Business Angel Network. Tommy, you've come to Istanbul. This is your second year here, and what struck you about this year's forum? Has there been any major takeaway from the last day and a half?
Well, the reason we come to forums like this is exactly because of one of the major takeaways I'm taking from there. Yesterday I had the privilege of listening to the Balkans Angel Association panel, and one of the major things that struck me is the similarity between the post-communist era in Eastern Europe and the post-colonial era in sub-Saharan Africa. And the fact that because you have had authoritarian governments and leadership in both instances, it has left a set of people who are genuinely struggling with entrepreneurship and innovation. And that creates a serious challenge for investors who are investing, recovering the kind of investment proceeds that they were expecting to make.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic and highly relevant to what we are encountering in Africa and how we navigate our future and where investors are coming from. Mm. Tommy, out of interest is over the last 1 to 2 years, coming to forums such as these, have you seen a shift in how people relate to the African opportunity, to investment opportunities, to angels in Africa?
Yes, I've seen, certain key features. The first is when we first started engaging, it was like Africa, I thought everybody there was poor and there was nothing. Then they've heard 1 or 2 success stories, and it's almost, last year was what I call the year of curiosity, where people were kicking our tires. But now we're starting to get, not just curiosity, 1 or 2 people actually co-invested with us last year from Europe. But this year, based on the experiences of those who did it last year, we're starting to get some serious interest. So I'm quite optimistic that, 5-10 years out, we will be part of the global angel investment scene properly, not just an add-on that's just arrived.
And perhaps to play a devil's advocate for a second is we spend a fair amount of time as a ABAN team attending different conferences, sharing the story of African startup opportunities and investment opportunities. Why do we spend time doing this? Why does it matter? Shouldn't we be spending all our time at home, not going to conferences such as these?
Well, then how will people know that Africans are developing Africa and they need support in that development, not that we want them to come and develop on our behalf? That is our message to forums such as this, and I think it's a critical message to be carried forward. And nobody can ignore what's happening with America first or Brexit or any of those things where we're seeing the rise of nationalism, where people really want to build their own areas, their own turfs and everything else, and they're unlikely to lend a hand, to give a lending hand if you're not doing stuff yourself. So this is the way of sharing with people that, look, hang on, we're going to do this with or without you. We'd really like you on board, but here's what we're doing anyway. And that's really what we do at conferences like this.
Fantastic. Tommy, we will see you multiple times across the continent this year in 2017. Any closing excitement for what you're looking forward to in 2017?
Oh, yes. I'm quite excited about two key areas, agri-tech and fintech, okay, with power and energy coming right smack bang as a third. So all those three are areas I'm expecting to see a lot in Africa this year. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tommy.
And so now here's a fun chat I had with one of our most treasured listeners in Uganda. He's a blogger and tech entrepreneur named Nicholas Kyanda. And after he and I shared many offline conversations, we finally managed to tape one of them to share with all of you. Now, it's a chat that bounces all over the place, as great chats tend to do. So do buckle up and enjoy.
I'm Nicholas Kyanda. I have an organization I run called the Hope First Group. We're based here in Uganda. It's a small business, but it runs a couple of things under one banner, which is mainly media, small business finance, and basic training.
Right. Nicholas, welcome to the African Tech Roundup, man.
Thanks, man. It's finally good to be in touch with you.
Absolutely. And just out of interest, what's your background? Are you a programmer, hardware guy, software? What are you into? I've
spent some time studying Cisco networks, and I also do a bit of programming because I build websites, but that's mainly just HTML and a bit of cascading style sheets, which is CSS, which is pretty basic. And then I also have some experience in building content management systems using basically Joomla and Moodle. I also have an interest in human resource management systems. And so I kind of right in between the hardware and the software side. And then I also really enjoy working with like Windows XP systems. I know Windows is pretty old, but I love playing around with Windows and Ubuntu. And so I'm into like the free and open sourceware movement.
So you're one of those people who was super excited to hear Microsoft open their arms to the open source community, I'm sure.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's been pretty interesting because what's happened with, I think Dell's taken it a step further now. They're building their laptops and installing open source software on their systems now. So it's become like a mandatory thing for them, which is pretty exciting.
And we recently reported on Blackberry opening up part of their API to development. How excited do you think Africans are about that, or African developers are about that? I mean, in most parts of the world, BlackBerry has long lost its luster, but there's a fair amount of users here on the continent. So what do you make of that and its potential to actually build up the software business for BlackBerry?
What I've noticed is with big telecom providers like MTN, and then some of the other older ones, the bigger giants, is what they've been doing is they have BlackBerry support for their high-end customers, and what they'll do is they'll provide top-level management with like smartphones like Blackberries, which also kind of means that at some point when those big providers decide that we're going to have, for example, in where I'm at, they do lots of competitions where they say, okay, we'll have an app design competition, and we'll give away this prize, this kind of thing. So if they decide to go system specific in terms of their development, then there's a lot of potential. But that means that what BlackBerry has to do, or what MTN has to do, for example, is MTN has to sit down and say, what's in it for us if we push your systems downwards towards our developers? And then the developers would gain interest. What has been happening for people like Huawei, for example, is they come in, they set up a school, they teach a bunch of kids at campus how to create and design for their systems. And then it's up to the providers to say, okay, we're going to sell Huawei phones, and we're going to provide support for Huawei phones. So it kind of becomes like it creates a whole chain, value chain, from the educators to the students that are coming into the system, and then to the guys themselves that are supplying the phones on the other end. Then what happens on that they do on this side is they'll say, okay, now we've given you these phones. Now we need you to brand them with with either MTN logos or Airtel logos or whoever the provider is that's working on that down here. So that's kind of how they do it. At least that's how the Chinese are doing it.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about the BlackBerry situation and their lost advantage. I mean, they lost the advantage they had when they were a market leader on the handset side. Look, their software has always been legendary, and their security regimen's been great. But the lost advantage of not having their smartphones be the most desirable and perhaps well distributed is a huge advantage to lose. And now trying to come to market with a standalone sort of software offering on its own merits, taking on like thousands of other software businesses that have been killing it for decades, is going to be, or at least killing it for the last couple of years, or excelling in specific little niches, is going to be really difficult for BlackBerry, I think.
It is. I mean, I'm glad they're fighting and they're back in the market, as is the case with Nokia. But what I think the challenge they have is one of the challenges they've been dealing with is when you allow another company to buy your product, then you kind of lose a bit of your essence. And
you're talking about Nokia obviously selling to HMD, or their sort of handset business to HMD.
Yeah, and remember what happened before when they had an agreement with Microsoft. You kind of lose something the moment you merge with another company and you give it your name. You see what I'm saying? So you almost want to put Nokia and the BlackBerry thing in the same category, although BlackBerry was kind of like in a class of its own.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, these huge organizations that have like their own strategic agendas and strategic goals. Sometimes they don't align perfectly.
Yeah, no, they don't. If it was possible, you almost want to buy the company, kind of like in the shadows, and then just leave them, have them keep their name, and just keep doing what they're doing, and then profiting on the side. But I don't even know if that's possible. Like, okay, for example, we're using Skype right now. Unfortunately, fortunately for us, it's worked. But you remember how at the beginning, I told you I use Linux, and so what's been happening is I think that the desire to merge, to bring in like Microsoft Hotmails and Microsoft MSN, to merge that to the platform has taken them quite a while.
Yeah.
Now they're realizing that there's a lot of developers that are creating software for Ubuntu and Linux, and so now the gap that was left for them to absorb this new system and this new environment it's proving kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But just like you said about BlackBerry at the beginning, is they had the advantage of having a very, very secure system, and they should build on that. Remember, like at the beginning when I think when Barack Obama had just taken the presidency, he was famous for using his BlackBerry. And then at some point, I mean, that would have been a brilliant opportunity to do some marketing thing just behind the idea that an American president trusts our phone. You know what I mean?
At the time, I mean, they thought the fact that they were proprietary and that their system was closed was arguably their biggest asset. And of course, that was a massive miscalculation on their part, I guess.
And then also, I think the same category of Nokia and BlackBerry is, remember, the forces with the battle between this whole globalization thing and this nationalization thing. Because for BlackBerry is arguably a Canadian brand, but it was a Canadian brand with a global reach. So how do you balance the desire to continue pushing your Canadian brand the forces of globalization, which is the same thing that you could see for Nokia. They're made in Finland, aren't they? It was like really big in the country, and it was taking the country places. But then how would they balance between going global and staying relevant locally, in a sense?
They're trying to recapture that nostalgia. I mean, with this news about them, reissuing their plans to reissue the 3310. That was my first phone, by the way. My first phone ever was a 3310. And I'm probably just going to buy one just because I have such strong positive memories, such nostalgic memories. And I don't know if I were to bet on either Blackberry or Nokia, and of course they're in hugely differing businesses on the software side. I know with Nokia they're trying to branch into basically helping mobile telcos, make the transition from just mobile telcos to information services businesses. And I know they've got like massive software plays on that end that they've recently announced. But I'm betting that they could actually make it in the sort of handset space. I think they could do what I think BlackBerry might find a very hard time doing in terms of recovering in the handset space.
Do you know if BlackBerry, the whole idea, because I hear that the BlackBerry keyboard is really popular for BlackBerry enthusiasts. Do you know if they're going to find a way of merging that with the touch screen system? Is the touchscreen system patented, or are they going to find a way of? Because I know that's really, really popular.
Do you know? I don't know. What I do know is that their handset sales are like tanking miserably. They are pretty much hanging their entire hope on growing software. Basically, two ways. Enterprise plays. I mean, they very famously partnered with a very unpopular politician in the U.S. who's friendly with the Trump empire. And then they're partnering with them, trying to get major government contracts all around the world, So they want to play in that arena. At the same time, they're trying to appeal to the development community further downstream, people not unlike you, who they hope will start to massage BlackBerry essence into the development community and and hopefully make it go mainstream. Mm-hmm. And they're hoping that between those two things, I think, they create this massive software business that hopefully will stand the test of time. At this point, I don't see them putting too much hope on taking on the the handset business in any sort of meaningful way. It's just become super competitive. Android has made it super complicated for them to even think about. And on the proprietary side, I think Apple's got it locked down.
Okay. What do you think about?
That's my sense of it. I'm not sure.
What do you think about the Asian side? Because what's been happening with the Huawei's that I told you about, the Chinese and of course Samsung now, is what Huawei did is they started off like pretty much just doing like USB sticks with internet, and then they just kept expanding. I'm not sure how this is going to play out if they use the Chinese model, because what the Chinese did is they just started off in a basically infrastructure, which is basically which pretty much runs on software, and you could see them doing some of what Cisco had done before, because Cisco had such a hold on the market in terms of its creation of routers and switches and taking care of the backbone of the internet, and then. But all those devices were being driven, just like you said, by software. But what the Chinese have done really well is they've come into the markets and they've started teaching students, young people, how to use their devices and how to program specifically for their devices. And so, if in my view, if Nokia is going to make or if BlackBerry is going to make any progress, they have to find a way of integrating into the university system as it stands, either the university system or maybe finding a way of going open source and putting some of their code out there and leaving it up to young developers to develop and to earn money from just developing and taking part in competitions and saying, okay, this is part of our code. We'll give you the rights to modify it, and then we can share profits. We can find a way of sharing profits.
I totally hear you on that, and maybe them opening up the API on a certain level, well, in a limited sense, might be the start of that sort of move towards like being fully open. Although I'm sure in their board, I'm sure the C-suite over at BlackBerry is still convinced of the fact that, you know, they're being the most secure sort of one of the world's most secure systems is one of their biggest tickets, and I don't imagine opening it up completely.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't know if they've even imagined a world where they'd make money after they made their system totally open. I don't know if they.
It's
I'm
a
sure
very
they
tough
think about
model.
it. I'm sure they think about it, but I'm not sure it's a tough model to crack, especially after you've lost the competitive advantage of being in everyone's hands, you know, that you had some years ago. But you know what? I love the digression we've taken. I mean, this is not even what we were going to talk about. What people listening to us right now don't know is that you are arguably our most, with risk of sort of ticking off some of our other very participative listeners, you're easily one of the more participative. And when I say participative, I mean, like, you take us on. I mean, like, you'll hear me or someone on the show say something or make an opinion or share an opinion or an insight, and you'll write me an essay, bud. You know, and I love it because they're typically essays that are worth reading all the way through. Of course, we don't typically share essays on our platform at africantechroundup.com or anything. But yeah, you always leave me thinking, you know, or always leave me with nuggets of wisdom or nuggets of insight, being in the East, you know, in East Africa, being in Uganda, in what I think the world considers widely, when they think of Africa, as one of the most progressive parts of the continent as far as tech and innovation, the East African region. I suppose South Africa kind of comes second, I think, you know, and in terms of how people think of Africa and innovation on the continent. And so your views, you know, it's always get me thinking. And you sent me a response to a conversation or a reaction to a conversation I had with Catherine Liu of Barclays Africa, and I'd asked her a question about a theory that's beginning to form, you know, around the potential of a bubble bursting in as far as Africa's tech industry is concerned. And I know a lot of our listeners are sitting in other parts of the continent. They've never been to Uganda. They don't know the scene is in, you know, they've never been to Cape Town or Joburg, Cairo, Lagos or Abuja. And they're not sure how much of the enthusiasm they see about our tech scene in mainstream media to actually buy into wholeheartedly, and how much of it to sort of take with a pinch of salt. And so, yeah, I want us to dive into that for a moment. This idea that there might be an over-enthusiasm in perhaps, you know, the way the scene is reported. And I say the scene, you know, wrapping Africa up in one bunch, which is a bad thing to do. But I mean, you've probably seen it. I've definitely picked up on it once in a while. And then there's sometimes VCs or angel investors, certainly startup founders looking for money abroad and even on the continent, who want to paint this pretty picture, which, you know, might not always be the case. And so give me your thoughts on everything I've sort of laid out as an introduction to our conversation.
What we have here is, in terms of like the startup scene, because that's probably the best place to start, is for example, there's a place called Outbox Hub. And what I've been trying to do in terms of figuring out how this thing works is I visit these places, and then I find out what model they're using for business. So the first one that I mentioned, called Outbox Hub, it feels very, very business driven. Then there's another one called the Hive Collab that was started by John Gauzier. Okay, what you do is they're incubators.
What is it?
They'll give you space. They'll let you work there. They'll give you internet, and then usually what you can do is the package you get. The amount of money you pay for will determine kind of the package you get. You get a nice office space. You get free internet for that month or for the period that you're connected. And usually those are basic services that you're going to get out of these co-working spaces. That's pretty much what they are. Now, additional services or additional things would be like, okay, there'll be mentorship in terms of finding industry professionals that could help you take your business to another level and those kinds of things. What you also have is like they'll have maybe special days, like Hive Collab, they used to have like special Mondays where they focus just on mobile health or health innovation in mobile, using mobile technology. Then you'd have maybe days when they do education. There's another one that's called Innovation Village Kampala, where what they've done is they've created, they've identified those key positions that would be trend-setting areas, and they've started creating like maybe you could call them clinics around those specific areas, like fintech, agriculture, environmental climate change, and then they also have something that they're developing around empowerment of women and girls in ICT. So usually what happens is the first one comes up and does an amazing job at something, and then others may follow, building up on what was done before. The two that I mentioned, Outbox Hub and Hive Collab, what they do is sometimes you'll get a partnership with an international group. For example, there's what they call Pivot East, and there's also Demo Africa, and some of them usually will show up in South Africa also, and in the rest of the East Africa region. But the guys who direct these projects have different itineraries, So what they'll do is they'll come and say, okay, we have a competition. Teams of 4 will come in, and maybe we'll have 5 areas in which the competitions are going to be based in, and so guys will create solutions for mobile, and they'll have maybe they'll have a competition in Uganda, and then they'll have like a regional meet. Then there's used to be also one called Mara. So it started by this Asian business guy that started doing small business and then kind of really expanded and went really big. But I visited them just once. I haven't been able to visit them again. He may have expanded and gone into other ventures. Now, in terms of what you were talking about, the bubble idea is what I've been trying to do. What I think the best way to do this is to track the progress of individual young people that take part in these competitions. That's not very easy unless they stay attached to the co-working spaces where you find them initially. But if you track these people and see how, especially the ones who, okay, yes, you want to track the ones who win, but you also want to track the ones who kind of don't win and keep competing and all those kinds of things. Now, if you track them and then are able to find out, okay, you won this competition, where are you now? How is the company going? You'll find some that say, okay, our product is running. We're running in 2 or 3 countries. I have one example of one that does an agricultural, won a competition for an agricultural solution. I think they're doing Kenya, Uganda, and I think Peru. So that was interesting that the solution found its way all the way to South America. But of course, that has its challenges. Right. Because that means that now maybe they have to think in terms of language and all those kinds of things in terms of expansion. Yeah. Now, you know how like usually when you have some of it is a bit like gambling, where the odds are against you, but once in a while when someone wins, you generate a lot of excitement around the developer community, right? Around the so people will flood that to see if they can win big. Now, if you watch the scene, you can pretty much figure out how to win. Because I think you basically need about a team of about 4 people. You need a guy who understands finance. You need a guy who understands code. You need a guy who understands presentation. And then you probably maybe just three basic guys to help you get your product through. So that's kind of like the technical part. Now the hard part in terms of establishing how useful it is, or the bubble part is sometimes the chunks of money that are promised for simple solutions are so large. So you get to wonder, is this really worth that much to put a product on a phone, for example, or on a device as a solution for say a global thing or health thing or whatever. That's one part. Of course, if it's like something that usually if it has a strong medical link, and that's something completely different.
So let me walk you back a bit, right? Let me walk you back. So in trying to answer this question of do we have a situation where a bubble is forming and it could burst, you've come up with this scientific, a quasi-scientific approach of looking at the landscape of acceleration and incubation we have for startups on the continent. You've named some people that are involved in those businesses. And your approach would be to now identify startups that come through that ecosystem and see how well they do, and at the same time try and evaluate whether the value that seems to be assigned to them or their valuations based on what investors are willing to put behind them, or what the startup founders themselves claim they're worth. Well, you're thinking about it in the sense of, are those figures realistic in the context of what these startups can actually, in terms of the value they can create and also the revenue they can create in terms of sustainability and being, basically sustainable businesses? Is that, am I sort of summarizing it well?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And so what are you finding? In that context? Are you finding that, are you finding that there is a good correlation between, firstly, are you finding that there's that the pipeline for great businesses or great startups and consequently deals for VCs and angels and VCs, do you see that pipeline forming nicely? And do you consider that the value that these startups are creating is genuine and as praiseworthy as some of the think pieces we see written all over the place about? And also, are they being valued correctly in the context of their potential to be
what I
businesses?
see is remember before in the message we were talking about, we talked about the whole idea of like a grant that can say, for example, you can get foreign support and someone helps you maybe take care of the month's rent for and that kind of helps you get through that month as you develop, as you focus your energies towards more creativity and those kinds of things. And the way I was looking at it is that in the ecosystem, the ecosystem is supposed to be a natural occurrence that everything else kind of gathers around and flourishes over. Like, for example, if you I don't know if you've read some of like Michael Porter's work with Harvard Business Review, when he talks about clusters, and he basically says it's like a formation that people don't normally even plan these things. Like, for example, in Uganda here, you have places where they do brick building and construction, and all of a sudden these little industries will start coagulating around a certain area and all end up doing construction-related stuff. In the U.S., it was like maybe aviation or like potato farming, and then everything that emerges out of the potato farming. So the thing that's unnatural, in my view, is what causes the bubble. Is what will result in the bubble, or is what causes the bubble. The idea that a business should be let to flourish on its own, and those who, yes, with minimum supervision, but the moment in which either the bank walks in or the other guy comes and says, let me put this in here and it will help your business go through, I think that sometimes can be a bit of a hindrance.
And so is that a criticism of the whole incubation model, the whole VC model? I mean, we've got like high-profile examples like Uber that are basically set up to be far too big to fail. There's sovereign funds behind them, massive VC potential power behind them. No one's saying it's a bad business, but it's almost secondary whether or not they are sustainable and potentially profitable, for decades to come at this point. And do you find that sort of attitude prevailing in Africa or in your context in Uganda?
What I see is like, for example, we've tried to just like I said, the models that exist here, we've tried to include the education system, in investing into, in terms of like, okay, let's let the young people go through the whole computer science course or the information technology course, and then maybe in the third year let him take part in a competition, and then progress. Or some of them have said, okay, let's get NGOs, for example. Let's get NGO support to come in and let's do something for governance, for example, where you have the ICT for development or ICT for governance. Then usually what happens there is then they'll focus on probably human rights and those kinds of things. Now, the thing that what usually we'll find is sometimes there'll be a bit of contention between governance on one hand, and then on the human rights side, and then the guys that are kind of involved. Because there's always going to be some sense of suspicion for at least on this continent with regards to social media, with regards to the whole idea and concept of human rights, and then stability of governments in general. There's always kind of like that suspicion that, dude, what are these guys working on? What are these guys doing? What is this government stuff that these guys are doing? So that's a hurdle that most businesses here will have to face, especially if they decide to do anything related to human rights or governance or that kind of stuff, unless they find a way of working directly with government and earning the trust of government. Now, in terms of how it reflects itself, is like if you look at your budgets and you look at how much is allocated towards ICT, that will kind of give you a rough idea how your startup community is going to flourish. So what I think we've tried to do here, and what some of the groups are trying to do here, is we're trying to see how we can merge our policy with what happens in terms of like the practice.
Many, many thanks to our friends at ABAN, David Van Dyke and Chris Campbell, for taping audio for us while they were on the road. Now, ABAN is definitely worth following on Twitter for all the latest news as pertains to Africa's emerging angel investment scene. Go ahead and follow them on Twitter at ABAN Angels. And thank you to Candace Johnson of the Global Business Angels Network, angel investment guru Tomi Davies, and of course a big thank you to good friend of the show Nicholas Gyanda, all three of them making this episode rock without a doubt. To listen to all the conversations featured in this week's show in their entirety, head over to africantechroundup.com and you'll find them on our Quick Tech Chats playlist. Then before I go, I'd like to thank our sponsor this week, Afrobytes. Be sure to take advantage of the early bird tickets on offer for the upcoming Afrobytes conference that they'll be hosting during the Future Ensemble Festival in Paris between the 9th and the 12th of June this year. It is undoubtedly the most important African tech conference hosted in Europe, and we're really pleased to be partnering with them. And then, of course, there's that incredible speaker list I went through earlier that you definitely don't want to miss. You've got to be there. Everything you need to know is waiting to be discovered at afrobytes.com. And again, we can't wait to see you there. That's it for this week. Do join me again soon on africantechroundup.com for all the biggest digital tech and innovation news from across Africa and beyond. We'll be coming at you again next week, but for now, I'm Andile Masuku. Until next time, do take care, Africa.